Today we'll be installing our electronic jet kit on a 2015 Indian. This is what comes in the package. We have the fuel controller, the two oxygen sensor bypasses that plug into the stock harness, Velcro and zip ties for the install. It also comes with a couple of stickers, a quick reference card that you can use for later that you can write your settings down on, and instructions. These are the tools that we will be using to install the fuel controller. I have a 3/8 ratchet, an extension, a 13mm socket, a pair of long 45-degree needle nose, a 10mm wrench, and then two flathead screwdrivers. First step is to remove the seat. To remove the seat, you'll just push up on the front of the seat and then slide it backwards. The next step after the seat's removed is we'll remove the gas tank bolts. There's 4 of them, 2 here, and then 2 more underneath the rubber protector. These will use the 13mm socket. Now that we've removed the 4 bolts from the gas tank, you'll have to uninstall the vent lines from the tank, which you can do by just pulling off, or you may need a flathead screwdriver. Now that we've removed the vacuum lines, now we'll just lift the tank up, and we'll have to unplug the fuel pump and also disconnect the fuel line going to the gas tank. This is the fuel pump right here, which you can disconnect by just pushing on the locking tab, and then the connector will come unplugged. And the actual fuel line has 2 blue plastic pieces that you'll have to depress. If you can't do it by hand, you may need your 45-degree needle nose. To remove the fuel line, you'll have to press down on these 2 blue sides right here, and right here. And you'll just squeeze those together, and then the line will disconnect off the tank. Now that we've removed the fuel lines, the vent lines, and unplugged the fuel pump, we can go ahead and take the gas tank off the motorcycle by lifting up on the back and then sliding it back a little bit, then just lifting straight up. Now that we have the gas tank off, you can go ahead and locate the injectors. This is your rear injector right here. And the front injector is very hidden. It's underneath the metal fuel line right in here. How to remove the injectors is there's a red lock assurance right here. You'll just have to take a flathead screwdriver and just very gently pull that back. Once you pull that back, you can go ahead and unplug the injector. So the hardest part of the install is trying to locate the front injector and unplug it. As you can see, that red tab down there is the front injector. At this point, I will be using my 45-degree needle nose and a long flathead screwdriver to unhook the injector. To remove the lock, I'll go underneath the coolant hose and then pop the lock up a little bit. The injector may turn while you're doing this, that's okay. Once the lock is released, I'll then use my 45-degree needle nose and I'll insert those behind the thermostat housing to get down to the injector. For some people it might be easier to remove this coolant hose right here, but just be aware that you will lose coolant and you will have to bleed your cooling system after reinstalling the hose. Now that our injectors are disconnected, we'll install the fuel controller. The first step in installing the fuel controller is going to be to put the ground wire on the common chassis ground, which is right here on the left side of the bike. And we will be using the 10mm wrench for this. Okay, now we'll route the harness, the EJK harness, up toward the injectors. Once you've routed the harness, you can now plug our mating connector into the stock harness. Make sure that you push in the lock and then plug our connector into the injector. Same thing, making sure you push the lock in. Now that you've plugged our harness into the stock harness and plugged both injectors in, just go ahead and with the supplied cable ties secure the harness. Make sure when securing the harness you don't get the zip tie really tight, because it could actually break the wires. Now we're going to take the supplied oxygen sensor bypasses and plug them into the stock harness. So to locate your stock oxygen sensors, if you look at your pipe, there'll be a little sensor that's actually out of the pipe, and then you can trace that harness up through. And then this would be your rear oxygen sensor connector. The rear O2 connector is located right next to the starter relay. Now locate the front oxygen sensor and trace the wire down. It'll actually run down underneath the radiator, and you should be able to access the connector underneath the front cowl. Okay, now that you trace the wire, you can locate the connector underneath your front radiator, and you should be able to fish it out underneath the radiator here. Now that you have your oxygen sensor connector out, just go ahead and press the tab and unplug it. Take the supplied oxygen sensor bypass, plug it into the mating connector, which is the stock harness, and then just put it back up in the cowling, along with the stock oxygen sensor harness. Now that we've plugged in the oxygen sensor bypasses into the front and rear, we've plugged in both injectors and we've routed the whole harness. Now we're going to reassemble the bike. Make sure you don't forget to put the vent lines from the tank back on. Now we'll just reinstall the 4 bolts. Okay, now that we've reinstalled the tank's tight, everything's hooked back up, we're just going to go ahead and key on. We're going to see that we have flashing lights on the controller right now. This is because there's no injector signal going to the controller yet. Now we're going to go ahead and start the motorcycle. We had yellow lights on because the vehicle was in cold start. Green will be your idle circuit. Now that we've shut the motorcycle off, the lights continue to flash because the stock vehicle will stay powered up for about 5 to 7 minutes. This is nothing to worry about. The lights will go out after 5 to 7 minutes. We're going to go ahead and Velcro the controller right to the top of the fuse panel. We're going to do this here because that way you can still remove the seat and pull the controller out on the tank for any additional tuning needed. The controller will come preset for stage 1 settings. And now if you'd like, you can take your quick reference card, and with the bike either turned on or just sitting with the key off, you can go through your settings and record all of your baseline settings on your card, and that way you can carry your quick reference card around with you. If you need additional settings or any other help, please visit electronicjetkit.com.